I'm James Lamb. I'm the manager of the CRD Arts and Culture Support Service, and I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
I'm Bimala Jeevanantham. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Arts and Culture Support Service.
Great. So this is our agenda for today. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to tell you quickly a little bit about the Arts and Culture Support Service at the CRD, give you a little bit of a grant overview. Of course, we're going to highlight the Incubator, Equity, and Idea Grant programs. Talk a little bit about the processes involved. We hope we've kept them pretty simple and understandable. Talk a little bit about next steps if you decide you want to apply for a grant to one of the programs. And then we're going to make sure that we've covered all the questions that you had and answered all your questions. So the Arts and Culture Support Service has been here at the CRD since 2001. There are 9 out of 16 jurisdictions. There are 13 municipalities and 3 electoral areas in the CRD. We have 9 participants in the service. It's established by a bylaw, which is an actual law that gives us the ability to give assistance, which are grants, for the purpose of benefiting the community. And we have a mission to support, promote, and celebrate the arts. I do want to mention the 5 participants that don't participate: North Saanich, Central Saanich, Sydney, Juan de Fuca, Salt Spring Island, Langford, and Colwood. It's important to know these because if you have an organization that's based in one of the non-participating municipalities, then we can't support you because the principle of a CRD service is that a jurisdiction that pays into it benefits from it. And so this is one of the limitations to our ability to fund organizations, so that you have to be in one of the participating municipalities. We'll talk a little bit about more about that in a minute. Of course, one of the reasons we support the arts is not only for their intrinsic value, but for social and economic benefits that accrue to the community. BC contributes over $6.7 billion to the provincial economy every year. This slide shows you a little bit about the CRD impacts, $177 million in GDP, audience attendance at CRD funded organizations, over 700,000. And the Greater Victoria area has a very high level of civic engagement through volunteerism in the arts. 23% of CRD residents volunteer in the arts in some way. And the Canadian average is only 3%, so we're really up there. Overall, we provided about $2.5 million in grants to over 90 organizations in 2020. So about basic eligibility for all of our programs. Organizations have to be a not-for-profit in order to receive a grant from us. This is a limitation that we have based on the Local Government Act, which is what enables the CRD to exist. So I'm going to talk a little bit about not-for-profit status in order to receive funding. But in addition to that, I mentioned you have to be in a participating municipality or electoral area to receive a grant. And you also must present your programming in a jurisdiction that contributes to the Arts and Culture Service. You'll see along the bottom of this slide the jurisdictions that do participate. So if you're in one of those, then you're at least nominally eligible based on your jurisdiction. And any organization can really only have 1 active grant per year. So if the timing allows you to apply and perhaps be turned down and apply again, you can certainly do that. But if you have an active grant, then you can't apply for another one until you finish the first. And that's just because we have limited resources and we like to try to fund as many organizations as possible. So getting to the grants, hopefully some of you will have seen this table on our website. This is a little chart that we put together to help organizations identify whether or not they're eligible and which program they are suited for or eligible for. Today, we're going to talk about 3 of these programs, the Equity Grant Program, the Idea Grant Program, and the Incubator Grant Program. So each of them have a different set of eligibility requirements, and we're going to talk about that now. So we're going to start with equity grants. Okay, equity grants were created in recognition of the fact that the programs that we had for quite a long time and still have are primarily aimed at traditional Western arts disciplines. And what we realized over time, of course, is that we were probably excluding cultural practices or other definitions of arts practices that weren't captured in that sort of Western idea of what art is. So we created this program, the Equity Grant Program. Because of this reason that we didn't want to define what was an arts practice in this program, we created something that allows organizations or groups to self-identify. That said, for this program, examples of equity-seeking groups that have applied in the past include Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, the deaf community, LGBTQ+, Two-Spirit, those with physical disabilities or those with challenges related to mental illness. We funded all those organizations, all those types of groups through this program. And in addition, we do allow other groups who don't fall into one of these more recognizable categories to self-identify. And there's a very simple form as part of the application that allows you to do that. So overall, you can see equity grants support arts initiatives by applicants from communities that are at risk of exclusion or have had difficulty accessing our funding for systemic reasons. There's a $5,000 maximum to this grant. So you don't have to apply for the maximum, of course, but there is a maximum amount that you will be funded for regardless of your budget size. It will fund the typical things that you might expect, things like artistic growth, creation of a project, development of an event, or production of an event. The slide you see is an example of an organization we funded through equity grants. It was an embroidery workshop program that was aimed at marginalized youth. It was sponsored by the Victoria Tool Library. There's a program called Tender Textiles. With equity grants, what we also realized was that some groups that are excluded from our funding is because of a very specific barrier in our programs, is that you need to be the not-for-profit organization. You need to have that status as a registered not-for-profit society. So in recognition that some groups don't have that status, we invented this idea of a sponsor society. So essentially, a non-society couldn't find a registered society that will act as your sponsor. In effect, the sponsor society lends their legal status to support the project. And they're really intended merely as the vehicle by which you can receive a grant. Needless to say, it requires you to create some kind of a partnership with a society that's willing to act on your behalf. But it was a workaround for this gap that we have because of our legislative requirements. So equity grants are a little bit unusual from our other programs in that you don't necessarily have to have an arts mandate in the way that we have traditionally defined it. Again, it's up to you to sort of self-identify and tell us what the arts practice is. You can partner with a sponsor society. And just for the information of a potential sponsor society, if they are eligible for one of our other programs, they can act as a sponsor society for you and still be eligible for one of our other programs that they might be eligible for. There are a number of ineligible activities under equity grants as there are for our other programs. These mainly include things like capital expenditures. So for example, we probably would not be buying you a new computer or a desk or anything like that. Generally speaking, all our programs, we don't sponsor fundraising activities, contests or competitions or things like scholarships. And it's important to remember that we don't fund retroactive programming. So anything that's already happened, we won't support. So it makes it really important for you to be aware of the deadline and when your proposed program is scheduled for. The other thing to note is under equity grants is that because some cultural practices require food to be present at the events that may be related to, whatever that might be. Equity grants is the one program where we will support the cost of food. So if your practice or your organization happens to be, just for example, around some kind of cultural event or activity that requires food, equity grants is one program that we will support the cost of food. The second program we're talking about today is the Incubator Grant Program. Incubator grants support emerging arts organizations, generally speaking, but not exclusively. We have funded existing long-term organizations through this program before. But essentially what we're trying to support through this is renewal or innovative arts practices or organizations that have difficulty accessing startup funding or expertise. It's aimed at organizations that have an arts mandate, that have a need for short-term capacity building, whether it's through staffing, it will pay for mentoring if you need to hire expertise to help you with something in particular, setting up a program. It will support temporary workspace if you're developing something new, or other training or resources related to setup or something related to a new or experimental arts practice. That's mainly, keep in mind, it's mainly around for organizations that are having difficulty accessing specific short-term costs or specialized expertise. This has a $5,000 maximum. Again, you don't have to apply for the maximum, but this is the maximum amount it will support. So again, shared staff resources, if you're partnering with another organization, if there's special training, again, mentoring or workshop space, things that a new organization may be short of funds for in terms of getting something off the ground. Again, ineligible activities we won't support in this program, things like food, similar things we won't provide support for capital expenses or retroactive programming. This is just an example of one of the groups that we funded. It was a brand new theater company, Hapax Theater. The third program we're going to talk about is the IDEA Grant Program. This has, the acronym for this stands for Innovate, Develop, Experiment, and Access. And this is a little bit of an outlier program for us. Every other program we have is intended to support arts mandated organizations. And what we realized at a certain point is that there was an opportunity in the community to support non-arts organizations who wanted to use the arts in order to deliver their non-arts mandate. So we created the IDEA Grant Program. It's got a $3,000 maximum. It's a little bit lower than the others. One of the reasons for this is because our primary mandate is to support arts organizations. But it's proven historically that $3,000 has been enough for a non-arts organization to, for example, pay an artist to promote a program. As I say, an arts mandate is not required. It's very specific to this program. And the typical activities are the creation of a program or the production of a program using the arts. A really good example of this was the Sierra Club, for example, an environmental organization. We funded them a couple of years ago, basically to hire artists to help promote environmental messages through art making out in one of their, in an outdoor environment. Victoria International Jewish Film Festival is another example of something that was funded through the IDEA Grant Program. It's mainly an organization whose mandate is to support the Jewish culture, but not specifically to present arts, but we supported them to do a film festival. Similarly, ineligible expenses, the same sort of thing, capital expenses, scholarships, retroactive programming, contests, and so on. There is an adjudication process to these things. The application has a standardized set of questions and a small budget page that requires you to provide revenue and expenses. Applications are reviewed by a body called the Arts Advisory Council. These are volunteer adjudicators. They're appointed by the political body that oversees our service at the CRD. So the Arts Advisory Council reviews applications, adjudicates them based and makes recommendations for grants, limited by budget, of course. They give recommendations to the Arts Commission, who are ultimately responsible for approving the budget expenditure. In terms of time, again, I'll refer back to the fact that we don't fund anything retroactively. It typically will take about 10 weeks after the grant deadline for us to work our way through getting the adjudication materials to the Arts Advisory Council. And then there's this whole series of meetings that are required in order to accommodate the process. So be sure when you're scheduling your project or envisioning the time frame for it, that you give yourself lots of time for our adjudication process. If you do apply, there's a couple of my three top tips for applications, particularly for those of you who may not have done a grant application before. Once you determine what program you're applying for, be really sure to read the statement of purpose for the program and the guidelines for your program to really understand what its purpose is and what the requirements are. The other thing is when you're answering the questions in the application, really be sure to answer the questions that are asked. I've been in the job here since 2002. So I think I've literally read thousands of applications in that time. And it's surprising how often you read an answer to a question that actually have no relationship. So it's easy to get carried away because you know your organization really well. And sometimes you'll write something in the heat of the moment or just off the cuff that doesn't provide specific enough information in regards to the question. And the third thing is the level of, or the sort of detail that you provide. Write for someone who knows nothing about your organization or project. Again, you know your organization really well. You've probably thought about your project quite a lot. So in your head, it's very clear. And it's really important for you to realize that the person who is reading your application knows nothing about your project or your organization, or likely doesn't. And so the better you can be in terms of being clear and concise, the better for the understanding and for your application. We do have an upcoming deadline, which is why you're all here, I think. It's a single deadline for all three programs. Applications are due on March the 25th of this year, of course, at 4:30 p.m. That's when we close. Because of the pandemic, we are only accepting online applications. So fill out the application, save it, and send it in an email, and we're going to give you that email address. In terms of making an application, your next steps would be, particularly if you've never applied to one of our programs before, to contact us. This is one of the things that we do. It's our job is to help you make a good application, right? So first of all, contact us. Here's our phone number. Here's our email address for grants. We want to confirm your eligibility for the program. It gives you an opportunity to ask questions and to request the right application form. When you call this number, you will get our staff person here, Heather Haywood. She's been with us for quite a long time, since 2005. She probably knows the programs as well as I do, and she will be able to assist you in making sure that you get the right application and that you're eligible. On our website too, we have quite a lot of information on the programs, including frequently asked questions about applying. We have lists of past funded organizations. That's really useful for new applicants to understand the types of programs and projects that will get funded and the amount that are funded through various programs. And you can also get sample applications. And I will underline that these are sample applications. We do need you to contact us to get the actual application. And I apologize for that. That actually is a limitation that we have through our IT department. They only allow us to post certain things. So that's a very quick outline of the programs. I hope that gives you some sense of what you might be eligible for. And in terms of what you have in your head about a potential project and the type of organization you are.
And yeah, let's stay connected. So you can reach us on our website. We also have a newsletter. If you sign up for this, you'll get an email about once a month with information about our grants and deadlines, as well as other information that might be of interest to arts organizations. So other types of funding that are available and other news within the CRD that would be of interest. And also you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. As well, I'll be sending an email in the next day or two with the PowerPoint, and then asking for your feedback about this. Thank you so much for coming today. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it. And we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.